I don't see you on the screen anymore.
I think probably, I don't know, that's kind of a setting where it spotlights you, but I'm sure we're gonna get to that.
Got it. That explains a lot. I'm obviously new at using StreamYard, but I learn new things every day. So there we go. That's, I guess, what I thought it would look like. All right. So, Christos, great to see you today. Why don't you tell everyone about the Startup Bootcamp or about emerging humanity?
Okay, well, how about an intro first? So I'm Christos. I'm Christos Kritikos, and I am, for lack of a better word, you would say I'm a product guy and a startup coach. So basically, I've been involved with startups and small businesses for about 20 years now, in various capacities. When I started, I was doing what we would call technology solutions, technology solution consulting, and they would work, with the executives and the business owners in creating technology solutions for them. And of course, over the years, the field evolved. What used to be custom solutions became usually SaaS services, and what used to be a solution became a product. So I found myself in what we call a product field as a product manager, and I was head of product for a couple of companies, for a couple of startups, and eventually one thing led to the other, and I've now found myself being a full-time mentor, coach, and advisor for early stage startups. Early stage meaning up to probably product market fit, Series A. And I help them with their product and their strategy, and basically what we would call in general becoming fundable. So create the right product, get to the market, and raise funds. So that's a quick intro on my behalf. Glad to be here, Janine. Thank you, and Miriam, of course, if she's still with us, I'm with behind the scenes. And yeah, so what are we going to talk about?
Well, I would love to learn more about your experience. And I know you have the boot camp I mentioned. Yes, I know I did jump the gun on that a little bit because it is exciting. So, yeah, I would love to hear about it.
About the bootcamp, well, this bootcamp actually created itself, I would say. My let's say my mentoring career starting through an accelerator in California, and I started mentoring their startups. What I noticed while I was mentoring them is that a lot of the founders, they were missing their fundamentals. It was it's part of the federal SBDC program, so it has sort of a community element. So a lot of the startups were not the way advanced startups ready to grow. There were people that were just starting, and they were missing like the vocabulary of lean startup, of the methodology, etc. So instead of, I found myself educating them a lot instead of actually working on their product and their strategy, which was the idea, right? The idea was to help them launch their business, not to just give them information they could find elsewhere. And of course, they wouldn't get it from elsewhere. So I started giving them homework. And so I created little handouts. I remember I had this PDF handouts. I would email them the handout and say, hey, read this handout, the couple of pages, and go watch this little video on YouTube and this and that, and do the homework in the handout and come back next week, and maybe we'll finally do some real work here. So this is how I got into this, and eventually what happened, I had the material, and I had seen the need repeatedly. I decided to eventually turn it into what we would call a bootcamp, so basically a group class. So instead of doing this one-on-one, to really open it up to a larger group of people, so that maximizes the impact that I can have through that material, through the methodology, and of course, just help more people in one go. So that's the background story there. And the bootcamp, this first one is called Startup Fundamentals, and it's really, you just have an idea and you don't know what to do with it, more or less. So it's meant to help you get clear about what your vision is, what you hope to achieve, your goals, Why are you getting into entrepreneurship? Why do you want to start a company? What is the goal there? And really solidify this, and then have a quick look at what elements this entails in terms of, oh, well, you need a product, and you need to get into the market, and okay, so you probably need to figure out what is your audience, etc. Really, like, not get very deep, but at least get an idea about all these moving pieces, and end up with an actual pitch, and like an elevator pitch or a little pitch paragraph. So if you bump into someone at a Zoom event, or soon in the future, hopefully in a real life event, and they ask you what you do, then yeah, you have this little 30-second, 40-second, minute and a half phrase that encapsulates what you're doing, and this becomes the guiding light for your activities moving forward, right? For turning this business idea into reality.
I love that, a guiding light for activities moving forward, because I definitely see the need for that. So what do you think are the biggest challenges that startups face?
I think the main, this is a very common question, and for me, the main thing to clarify is that depending on the stage of the startup, the biggest need changes, right? So even when we're talking about early stage startups, I still see a number of different stages they go through. Of course, we have the early and not so early, right? So once a startup hits market fit and they're ready to grow more aggressively, then they enter what we would call the growth phase, right? And the distinction there is that until you have a market fit, you need a lot of work on your product. You need to keep iterating on your product to figure out what is the sweet spot where you will click with your audience. But once you get that and you have clicked with your audience, now you have a recipe of success, and the game shifts to more of an operational game because you want to replicate this recipe. So this is why we're talking growth, and there the game is, how can you take what you're doing and do it 10 times more? And 10 times more could mean more distribution, more support, more operations, more everything, right? More market activity. So this is where you would raise that Series A to throw a lot of money into this replicating whatever you are doing, growth. Before that is what we would call usually early stage. But even in that early stage, for me, I would usually see 3 or 4 different phases. And we have the just an idea phase. And just an idea means you just have an idea, nothing else. Like you bump into something that you think you can do to contribute to society, to humanity, to the market, or whatever. So you just have an idea and very little structure, and also very little information. So that first phase is more educational, and of course a lot of these people can go and click around on the internet and get some information. There's wealth of information. Even I do the same thing. Even the boot camps, I give resources like people can go get from the internet. But this is what we would call, for me, the very first phase. And this Startup Fundamentals Bootcamp that I have coming up tomorrow is about that phase. Then once things are a little bit more solidified, for me, we get into turning that plan, that pitch, into more of what it would be a real business structure. And that entails really getting deep and identifying all those moving pieces of a company, which is your product, your market, your operations, what kind of resources you need, getting really deep on that, and find the funding, right? So this would be the second phase. And then once you have the funds, it's about developing your first version of your product and launching that first version of the product. So that would be a third phase. And the fourth phase for me would be, once you have your product, you iterate until you hit that product market fit. So really there is 4 different phases. And that the original question, what was the challenge? And I really took the long road here. But so the challenge really depends on the phase. Now, the methodology is usually the lean startup methodology, and the product development methodology we're talking about, technology products, is more or less the same, but the focus and the priority changes through these phases. So I would say one of the main challenges is that a lot of startups don't take into consideration what phase they're in. They will not say, well, I'm just starting, or I already have the first version of the product, because that changes their needs, that changes the priorities, and essentially changes what is the next step for them. So for me, that's one of the first main challenges. And then based on that, of course, there's always the market, there is the investors, there is the internal operations and needs. So there's a lot of challenges of that type.
Yes, that's interesting. So you're seeing that people are focusing on activities that are inappropriate for the phase they're in terms of like being the most effective with their time and with their resources.
Yes, I would say. And don't get me wrong, I have the same problem as well in my own business. I think it's natural for all of us when we get too close to the trenches to lose a little bit of that outside viewpoint. And so it's not uncommon to see people putting time and energy and resources into, I don't want to say the wrong priorities, but not what would be the first priority. And that can be, sometimes it can be at a macro level of, I mean, one of the reasons I'm doing this is because I really want to help entrepreneurs, and sometimes it breaks my heart. I've worked with startups, they come to me and they've already spent like $100K to develop an application, and it's not the right application. And this is literally like these guys, they threw $100K down the drain. It's heartbreaking, honestly. It's like, it's really sad. And so there is, at this macro level, this kind of a mistake. But even the people who know the methodology and follow all the right steps and they do everything right, it's still me including that I advocate and teach the methodology. I think we all get this, short-sighted. We get short-sighted sometimes, and to lose track of what would be the next big priority. So I think it's important. This is where it's important to have a support network, right? Whether it's advisors or coaches or friends or accountability buddies, whatever you want to call it, or whatever it is going to be. It's good to have this checkpoint where you get off the trenches and you get back to the big picture and you ask yourself, am I really spending my time and money and energy into the most important thing right now?
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I mean, that's a really important question that founders need to ask themselves. So I know this is the question you probably get asked all the time also, but I'm sure people are curious to hear about how COVID has impacted what you were working on, and also in the bigger picture, how you see things changing in the future.
Well, COVID did take a hit it was a domino effect. COVID affected the liquidity on the market because everybody got very scared and very cautious. So investors got very cautious. So investors wouldn't invest. Early stage startups, usually they have very low revenue. External investment is a lifeline. So what I saw happen a lot is that a lot of those startups I was working with, literally everything froze for a couple of months because the funding froze, or there were all the conversations about raising money, etc. They all got pushed back. Admittedly, and this is, I have hands-on examples on that. The federal stimulus did help, especially the payroll protection program, A lot of the companies that they had inelastic expenses because they had payroll, they were able to cover these expenses and move forward and continue developing, etc. So, but definitely it was a big hit in the early startup ecosystem with COVID, mainly because it affected the liquidity in the market. Now, that being said, things did start to return to a little bit, I would say. So March, April was a shock for everybody. But after May, I did notice things started moving again, and started moving both in terms of activity in the market. If you were not lucky enough to be Zoom or one of those companies that were really that really benefited from the switch to virtual for everything, then a lot of those other startups, they had to go back to the market and find clients from start. They didn't start from zero, find new clients, start conversations again, and get the engine going. So definitely this affected, but at the same time there is quite a lot of opportunity, especially because we're talking usually technology companies, and technology is agnostic to geography to a large extent, right? It doesn't depend on physical presence. And as we have experienced, of course, all of us with the Zoomification of our life. So there's definitely opportunity there. And I would say there is opportunity in restarting previous activities that froze due to the lockdown, the pandemic shock, but also finding new opportunities, or finding new, let's say, reimagining, reinventing old things slightly different for the new reality. So definitely things have started to thaw, I think, and they've started to move forward. A lot of companies also, I've seen companies where they were active in the physical world, a little bit later stage, so they've already had some solid revenue stream and some solid investment, and they are making a move into virtual in order to maintain activities, or generate revenue, or even just engage their audience digitally, because they cannot do it physically anymore. So there's definitely, like in all cases, there's been a hit, but also there's a lot of opportunity.
That's interesting. I know I noticed that a Sephora location here in Buckhead in Atlanta closed, and I guess I hadn't noticed that before, and I was like, don't be so shocked that the Sephora store closed, because nobody is going in there to try makeup anymore. Yeah, but hey, we actually had a question from the comments, back to what we were discussing a couple minutes ago, because I agree with you, Christos, when you mentioned the support network is important. So where do you suggest founders find the support network?
Well, there is a lot of places to look, right? There is first of all, you can just create your own network through people you may know, or you come to an event like this and you can probably, I don't know, exchange info. We didn't say that. I usually like to say this at the beginning, but I want to invite everyone to put their info in the chat. Put their name, where they are, what they're doing, and their LinkedIn or some info like that, and connect with each other. So this is a great way to expand your own network and meet other fellow-minded entrepreneurs or founders or aspiring entrepreneurs, and then exchange information through them. So definitely, this is a way to do it. There is groups like Antra, right, or Product Hunt. There is various initiatives like the Million Cups, for instance, etc. That it's places where entrepreneurs would come together, and this is a nice place to meet people. And this is just to find fellow people and create a support network. I'm talking about a free network, right? I'm not talking about getting a coach or a mentor or entering a paid program. I'm just saying you can just find a group of people and have, connect with them, inspire each other, find an accountability buddy, a good old-fashioned accountability buddy, and move on like this. Or there is people like me that's my job, to coach people. There is programs where they offer mentors, accelerator programs, incubator programs. Cities offer some of them. They're free sometimes. There is paid ones. So there is a wealth of places where people can find support. I don't want to advertise my services specifically. That I mean, there's plenty of them, but for sure, find something. Find an external partner for this for yourself. I have coaches. I have accountability buddy that I'm using for myself. So it's like, it doesn't matter if you're just starting. It doesn't matter if you are way advanced in the game. It's very important. It's extremely important just to get that external set of eyes and a different viewpoint. So network with people, get on some of these groups, network online, and reach out to programs or professionals that can help you. I don't have access. I'm on my phone, so I cannot type. But if we can send a follow-up to everybody, then I can definitely provide some resources in a follow-up message to the people who attend, who see us right now, and just probably a couple of groups, etc. Like things that I like and I have used in the past or I recommend.
That'd be awesome. I mean, I would love to see your resources as well. I'm sure some of them, like for example, Entra. Well, you and Miriam and I are all in Entra, which is great. But there's others as well, and I'm always looking for different ways to network, because I agree it's really important. So, what makes emerging humanity different from the other communities and networks you mentioned?
I never had this question before. I think what makes, for me, emerging humanity is about entrepreneurship as a catalyst for prosperity, for economic development, right? I'm a big advocate that local businesses generate economic activity wherever they take place, right? Wherever their activities take place, there is economic activity. This economic activity could be that you generate revenue, you hire people, you leave people, you leave money, you leave resources in the local community. So entrepreneurship for me is a path to economic development, and economic development is a path to prosperity. Especially, I think, being in the United States, and I'm in New York, and obviously down in Miami, etc. We are not, we don't come in contact too often, or often enough, or very often, with what we would call maybe neglected, underdeveloped parts of the world or society, right? But there is a lot of areas, and I'm thinking a lot of the more developing part of the world, where the infrastructure is not there, basic needs sometimes are not covered properly, and all that stuff. And so there is an environment where basic, what we consider normal, and becomes the basis for our aspirations and our dreams, etc., doesn't even exist there. And there is, of course, many ways to approach this problem, but the approach that I like to follow, and the approach that I'm passionate about, the one that I pursue, is entrepreneurship. I really think that by helping people to start companies, by helping people start businesses, and helping them create and launch successful businesses, this will generate job positions, it will generate economic activity, and all that will lead to prosperity, will lead to growth, and it will lead to advancement for these geographical areas, for these pockets of society, for so humanity as a whole. So this is the cornerstone of emerging humanity, and a lot of the activities that I'm doing and I'm pursuing, and a lot of my roadmap, my business roadmap includes this sort of being an ambassador for entrepreneurship, spreading entrepreneurship, but also spreading the methodology and the system and the right way of doing it. So maximizing your chances of success in order to maximize the impact. So this is, I would say, it's a little bit of a romantic, idealistic approach to entrepreneurship, but I would say this is what makes us different. And so this is, I mean, the DNA of the company, of Emerging Humanity, of the initiative, if you want to call it this way. And so, of course, the community carries the DNA as well. And most people involved are people like that they have this sort of positive, humanitarian to some extent, romantic view of where we can go with this and where we can, create a better world basically for all of us.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. So that does actually tie into another question we had as well about whether you only work with startups that are doing something good for humanity.
So far, I think all the startups, well, I'm going to answer in two, I'm going to give two answers to that. I'm going to give the straightforward answer that says that, yes, I choose my startups, the startups I work with, and they usually, they aspire to do something good for humanity. I'm actually very specific with the startups I work with. Usually it's B2C products. I like to feel that I'm close to the human being. So mainly I do B2C products. I say product because the company may sell B2B, but the product can be B2C, like an educational product is sold to universities, but is meant for the students, right? So I got a few of those, and this is a B2C product, even if the sale is B2B. So I do B2C products, and I will do education that I just mentioned, health and wellness, sustainability, economic development, travel and hospitality. So I will basically, there is these verticals that I work with, and this is not some kind of a very thought through, conscious decision. Is basically this is the areas I'm passionate about. These are the areas where I feel like I contribute, and it's true and unfortunate. But if someone comes and has a startup and is some kind of a B2B, I don't know, logistics solution, for instance, and nothing wrong with B2B logistics, but I don't feel my juices flowing and I don't feel this fire burning in me, so I don't feel I can help them. I don't feel I can contribute, right? But right. If it's one of the ones I mentioned, then I definitely feel this, and then I'm like, okay, yeah, I can work with this founder, I can work with this company, and have an impact. So yes, I do focus on these companies that I feel they have a positive impact on society, on humanity. Now, there is a flip side, and we've seen that clearly with technology companies nowadays, that there is a dark side in of technology and the way it's been implemented and the way it's operated. I mean, human beings always find ways to abuse even the best intentions of someone else. So there's definitely this risk, but I want to believe that this is more of I would say, an ethical question than a business question, meaning that businesses traditionally they have focused on maximization of profit, and this model doesn't really work anymore. And if I can actually, let me open a 2-minute parenthesis here. What happened, and this is basically our model of doing business is, one could almost dare say, a little bit outdated. We're going to get a little bit into sociology now, but it's okay. But back in the 50s, when businesses were physically located, just having a business that was trying to maximize profit guaranteed that by generating profit, you would leave money to the local community. And so the American dream, to a large extent, and the prosperity of the American society was built on the foundation of businesses that seek to maximize profit, because just by the boundaries, right, the rules of physical world, these businesses, they would maximize profit in a geographical area, and that would develop that area. It's the similar thing that I just said earlier about the power of entrepreneurship to bring prosperity. Now, what happened with globalization and digitization and virtualization is that a business can operate theoretically in a geographical area, but doesn't necessarily create prosperity in that area, because the operations are outsourced, or they hire people in other countries, etc. So what this created, it creates a little discrepancy, where just seeking to maximize profit doesn't necessarily benefit the society, doesn't necessarily benefit the local community, doesn't necessarily benefit humanity as a whole. Environmentalism comes as a parameter here. Work conditions in developing countries come as parameters here. They all come into this picture, and these are the big problems that humanity is facing, right? And to hear about them, we face them, we feel them. Politicians, they leverage them to push their own agenda, etc., etc. I mean, we have elections coming up, so this is quite, applicable. And really what happens there is that the old modus operandi of capitalism, essentially, where just by maximizing profit, inevitably you create prosperity, doesn't cut it anymore. We get to consider the sustainability, the environment, the local community. We get to consider all these other parameters now for business activity to have what is the desired effect, the desired at the policy level, right? Because we're talking, these are big policy decisions. So yes, to close the parenthesis and go back to the original question, yes, I consciously choose to work with companies that I feel they are willing to make contribution, but also on top of that, I actively advocate an attitude and an approach to business that maximizes or ensures, or at least improves the possibility that it will have a positive impact. Because part of it has to do with what we're doing, right, in terms of our product, our services, but also a large part of the impact and a large part of whether it's going to have a positive outcome and a positive result for humanity and society. A lot of it depends on our conscious decisions. And so at the level of the CEO, at the level of strategy, at the level of setting the course for the company, the direction, these are decisions that can be made consciously, and they can, of course, affect the bottom line a little bit, but can create a different outcome, basically.
That's interesting. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
I went a little bit deep, and right, I went a little bit too deep there, but it's okay. Sorry, go ahead.
No, this is good. I realized this issue about how maximizing profit does not necessarily benefit society, but I didn't really think about the history of why companies were maximizing profit to begin with, other than that people want money. So that's really interesting that it started in the 50s. I actually had not realized that.
Well, probably started before then, but so actually maybe I shouldn't put the decade there, because I may be wrong. I had read about this and it's been a while, but it was a conscious policy decision at a certain point. And again, we're talking policies that they come from the government, from the Federal Reserve when it comes to liquidity, etc. There is policies that their focus basically was, the fundamental assumption was that by allowing people to pursue their profit maximization activities, we will generate prosperity. That was the fundamental assumption there, and that doesn't exactly work anymore. It's so maybe it's time to I don't know, to update a little bit. Right? But again, this is we'll go way off entrepreneurship and startups now, so we can
That's
we can
true.
bring it back.
Yeah, no, you're right. So, yeah, I guess to bring it back a bit, would you like to talk about the different funding options for startups? I know we touched on this earlier when you mentioned that investment is the lifeblood for early stage startups. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are about bootstrapping versus VC investment and crowdfunding.
Yes, definitely. I would say a very common question. There is and I will touch again a little bit on what I said earlier about there is different phases where you go as a startup, and the kind of funding you get access to depends a little bit on the phase you are in. Now we hear a lot of stories about like if you have a successful company under your belt, then you can just raise money with an idea and nothing more. Of course, a lot of these things are true, but let's say in the average case of an average entrepreneur, right, where you don't have 3 exits under your belt, etc., and you don't already know a bunch of investors on a first name basis, then the kind of funding you get access to depends to a large extent on the stage you're in. And the stage basically means that the earlier you are, the higher the risk, and the higher the risk, the less willing people are to, give you money. It's kind of very simple. So there is definitely, I would say, the first possible funding that the people have is, their own savings or friends and family. They say it's the 3 Fs. They invest in very early ideas. It's friends, family, and fools. Now, of course, some of these fools can become billionaires, so they're not always that fools. But so if you're very early stage, then usually we're talking either your own money or you go and you find money from friends, etc. Of course, you bootstrap, you put your own sweat. Now, if you are a tech person and you want to build a tech company, you can put your own sweat and create your own product and launch it on the market, probably. But if you're not, then you get to find ways to do that. Now, usually if you're a tech person, because you can put your own sweat and develop something, you skip some parts of the process. I've seen this quite a lot. You skip the part of the process where you validate your idea and you validate your market before you spend 6 months of your own sweat to build the product. So even for people who can build their product for free, my suggestion is assume you are paying to build your product and do whatever you would need to do if you had to pay to build your product, which means validate and find some early source of funding. So if you're super early stage, basically we're talking bootstrapping, friends and family, etc. Once there is a little bit of traction, there is a wealth of possibilities that open up. There is an interesting amount of activity in smaller amounts of investment. There is some VCs that they would invest 6 digits, low 6 digits, right? There is angels that they would invest 5 digits or low 6 digits, and there is crowdfunding possibilities that can also help very early stage startups raise money. The key in all these cases is to be fundable, right? It's not so much, obviously it helps if you know investors, and a lot of people, I get people come to me and say, hey, do you know any investors and this and that? I have this great idea. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but a lot of times that I tell people it's not about knowing the investor, it's about really being fundable. If you're fundable, then eventually you will get to the investor, right? But if you're not fundable, even if you know the investor personally, then it's not going to happen, because the investor is liable to their customers, to their clients. Their job is to actually make investments that they will turn a profit. So if the business, if the idea is not at a point that meets certain criteria, then knowing the investor is not going to help. But if we're talking early stage, then it's basically you go bootstrap, friends and family, in order to get to a certain point. If the idea is really sexy and trendy, for lack of a better word, crowdfunding could be an option, because people get excited, especially if someone is really, I would say, is more of a promoter personality, and they can put something together that can excite people and inspire people. Yeah, that would be possible. They can raise money through crowdfunding. And I do actually know a company that you can crowdfund yourself, but actually I know a company that they will set up your whole crowdfunding campaign and guide you through the process, et cetera, for a small percentage of the money you will raise. So you don't really pay them anything out of your pocket. They take care of everything for you. And we can include that in the resources that we send to people. So there is a wealth of options there for early stage people, but I would say unless you have an MVP with traction in the market, MVP, minimum viable product, like unless you're in the market already and you see some traction, VC is probably out of reach for you. So it's more angels, friends and family, so people you can access through your network, and crowdfunding.
That makes sense. So, well, this is interesting. So I know you mentioned that if you can do it for free, if you can create your product or your MVP for free, you should still look at you should still make an effort or like get the funding, even if you actually don't need it. So I'm curious if you could expand on that a bit.
Well, I don't say you to get the funding, but do the homework as if you are going to get the funding. And I mean, this actually, a lot of these questions we're discussing are parts of the bootcamp that starts tomorrow. But and this is on the second week of the bootcamp, we go much deeper into your why. And of course, a lot of people in the ecosystem, and anybody who will search why, there is the Simon Sinek presentation about knowing your why and promoting your why. But for me, why, there is a why that carries along and gets to be part of all the activities. And first of all is, why are you doing this yourself, right? But also, why would the investor invest in you? Why would the partner with you, right? The co-founder. Why would the early stage employee join your team, right? So any person that gets involved with a startup, with an early stage startup, there is a big why there. I mean, there is a big why in anything we do. You can be a large company and you are talking about another round of investment, or you're talking about getting into the market and acquiring more customers or hiring someone. There is a why. Why would the person buy? Why would the person work for you? And all that stuff. But if the company is big, the why is a little bit more clear, is a little bit more solidified. There is financial compensation for an employee, right? There is a clear value in the product or the service for the customer. There is clear benefits or upside for an investor. But if the company is just starting, none of these things exist yet. They're not defined. So it's important to define this why. And usually, and I see this a lot, one of the accelerators I mentor for is tied to a university, in California, UC Riverside. And there's a lot of engineers coming out of the school, and you see all these young aspiring entrepreneurs. They start writing code, creating their product, and they never asked why. They never asked, why would anyone buy this? And why would someone help you with your marketing, right? And it's not just, oh, it's a great idea, or here is 50% of a company. Well, 50% of a company that, is worthless, it's also worthless. So this why, for me, it's important that this why gets ingrained in the mindset of an early entrepreneur, and constantly ask the question for the investors, for the customers, for the partners, for the co-founders, for the potential employees. Always ask why they would actually do that. And obviously, this is a very different mindset than just, well, I can write code, so I will start put together the first version of the application and launch it out there, right? So this gets to be, for me, it's a foundational thing. It gets to be built in all the activities and guide the activities and force a reprioritization, right, before moving forward. So yes, even if you can do your product for free, and even if you already have a team, you have a couple of co-founders, and yeah, you can do the marketing and they can do the engineering, etc. Even in this case, ask all these whys. Ask why you would do this for 5 years straight, because this is how long it may take.
Right. Well, it could take longer than that. It could take a while.
Yes.
That's what David Meltzer says. If you have the 20-year plan, you'll be at 50% at like year 18. And then the other 50% done in 2 years. You're laughing. You must have found that to be true.
Yeah, well, yeah, some kind of percentage like this.
So this is great info about asking why you're doing something. So I'm curious. So there's a couple of issues, and I realize these are sort of successive stages that, I mean, well, you're always asking why, really. And as you said, it does become more solidified over time. So, but there is that first step, and it sounds like the boot camp really is going to help people get started with the bigger picture why, and, you know, finding their idea all the way up to creating the elevator pitch and really being confident in the idea. So all of that said, and then the next stage, I know, and you're doing the next boot camp is more so about being ready to invest. Do what?
Fundraising, you know, like to become investor ready, what we would call it.
So which of those do you find lead to, I guess, a bigger struggle between like the why and the ideas, or more so on iterating the product with the customer feedback, which would be more a part of being ready for investors?
I would say in earlier stages, how can I say, ingraining why into the mindset of the founder, it's sometimes more challenging. It sounds simple and they get it. I mean, we all get it. Like probably I say it right now and everybody gets it, but then we forget about it. So it's important to go back to it. And again, that goes back to the idea of you have an accountability body, or you have a coach, or you work with a program, and then you have this external set of eyes that says, "Uh-oh, you're now off course. You're off the course you said you're going to move because something changed in your priorities. And is this conscious? Is this the right thing? Is it you get to do course correction, or you got to redefine the course to what is the new path, right?" So early stage, I think, and again, we're talking about people that they are excited. The entrepreneurship is quite trendy, let's say, nowadays. So they have an idea, they want to do it. Ingraining the why there, it's really, I mean, it's like being a party pooper. Like the person comes with this excitement, you have to basically almost shoot them down and say, okay, your 25 whys, they don't add up, right? Then a little bit later, when we're talking about investor readiness, then it gets really challenging with building your case. It's really building a business case, right? To prove that you're fundable. So there's a lot of nitty gritty, where it may be being in the market and talking to people and iterating and improving on what you have and collecting the data points, right? Because it's about supporting your aspirations and your claims of fantastic growth, supporting them with some early data that, you know, can convince people that, yeah, you know, this stands a chance. So you got to collect this data. How are you going to find this data? And then that's where the iteration comes, and getting in the market and trying different things, etc. So this is, in that phase, it's more about that challenge. Of course, yes, the why is always there. Why would someone buy? And then you launch an experiment to see if they would buy. And if they don't, you go back to, well, why didn't they buy, and why would they buy next time around, and you iterate that way. But as a fundamental mindset, the why comes much earlier, I think. And then that comes out in all aspects of the business, and then it gets to manifest in all the activities. And then it's more of the nitty-gritty, to go through the steps and collect the data to build the case to be able to go to the investors.
That's great. Yeah, we're a few minutes away from wrapping up. If I see any more questions, I'll definitely ask them from the audience. But before we wrap up, what do you think makes the difference, or really moves the needle with getting the right data you mentioned in terms of customer discovery to build the business case for your product?
For me, what is very important is, let's say, building a habit of dialogue with the market. So it's not about I build a product and then I go out there to find the customers. Is I go to the market, and first I find the customers, then I build the product for them. And of course, it's not that customers, they grow on trees. It's about having a dialogue with the market and identifying there is a need somewhere, and then going back to the same people sometimes and telling them, 3 months ago you told me you have a need, here is the product, do you want it? And this could be your first customers. And then it's a continuous iteration. So again, if the right sort of fundamentals and the right sort of habits have been built, they have been ingrained in the DNA of the company, then a lot of these things become simpler moving forward. It's still challenging, it's still difficult, you still have to go through the motions, but at least it's it's a little bit more on a sort of an autopilot. It's exactly like building proper habits. It's building proper entrepreneurial habits that help you and support you moving forward, to succeed, or to at least make the ride a little bit easier.
That's great. I love the way you put that about building proper entrepreneurial habits. That's so important. So we are going to wrap up shortly. If anybody in the audience has more questions, is there anything else you would like to tell us, Christos, before we do, or anything we didn't cover yet that you would like to share?
I would say, going back to the why, at a personal level, know why you're doing that. I think this is one of the most important, like a key takeaway, know why you're doing that. And again, this is something that we discuss further. I discuss a lot in the bootcamp, but find your personal why in terms of what kind of impact do you want to have? What kind of contribution do you feel you can have? What kind of company do you want to have? It's not necessary for everybody to have a unicorn, a $1 trillion valuation. But if you feel this fire in you to actually do something on your own and get out there, take the step. You're never 100% ready, right? Like first you're gonna take the step, and then you're gonna get ready probably. Find the support network we said earlier. Connect with fellow entrepreneurs. Attend the bootcamp, join other events like this, find the network, find the inspiration, find the motivation around you that will support you, right? And take the first step and start doing it. And that will be a learning experience. And over time, you're going to get better at it. And yeah, you're going to get somewhere. So that's, I think, the key takeaway. most of us who are doing this, anybody who is not a government employee, I would say, we're doing this for our lives. And it's rewarding, it's exciting, it's scary, it's uncomfortable a lot of the times, but hey, it's the ride, so enjoy it.
That's true. Yeah, I thought this through on my own in the past as well. Like even when I was in commission sales jobs, which are such a grind, like working for 100% commission, I was like, well, I'd rather have this stress than to be limited in a government job. And the government is a great fit for some people, but I don't think that's most likely the audience today. And for the startup boot camp is probably looking for a more entrepreneurial path.
Probably. So do you have any more questions?
Well, I mean, I think we covered a lot today. That's interesting what you say about the why, because I think that for every person, there's definitely, I mean, and yes, I know that these days there's a lot more expectation to like share about your life and what your true, I guess, everything about yourself. People are just becoming more public online, but I still think that there's kind of like social reasons for doing things, and then there's different layers, and then I mean your startup, in my opinion, should also be really personal to you, like beyond what you would post on the internet. I don't know if you agree with that.
Definitely. There is a sensationalization, let's say, of being more visible, etc. And there is, of course, a lot of an upside to it, right? And we've seen this a lot with influencers, etc. But at the end of the day, you got to know your own reasons, and these reasons, they have to come through into the company. A startup lacks structure. If you have a big company, there is structures in place, and the structures, they create boundaries for everybody involved, so it's easier for people to stay within their role. But if we're talking a startup, really the vision and the values of the executive team are probably one of the most important factors in defining how people are going to be, what kind of people will get involved, etc. So you get to know your reasons, and you not only get to know your reasons, you get to allow your reasons to spill into what you are doing. Like it gets to be personal to some extent when the company is just starting, because this will drive everyone. You're gonna drag everyone across the finish line with your passion and your vision. Drag is not the right word, but it's not enough. There's nothing else there. Like there is no structure, there's nothing. So it's that vision, there's passion, is the why that will make a big difference. So definitely super important. So you get to know your own reasons for doing that.
Yeah, I agree. That's great, and I know what you're saying. Like, yes, you are like being the light that inspires others, and hopefully it doesn't feel like dragging, because the people you're working with are also equally as aligned, motivated, accountable, inspired, all of that, because I think that most people dislike the feeling of dragging others. So yeah, maybe if you're dragging, maybe you should just drop them.
Yeah, that was the wrong word. Yeah. Inspire them, motivate them.
Yeah, definitely yeah. Inspire, but yeah, I mean, you do have to uplift. I mean, everybody is human and like has their moments. We can't actually operate like robots. So yeah, as long as you're only dragging for moments, I think that could be okay.
Sometimes dragging is necessary.
I know. I mean, just being real, like if you're going to do this, I don't foresee, a situation where you're not ever dragging. That would be probably unusual.
Mm-hmm. And dragging ourselves as well sometimes. Don't forget that. Yeah. So, but
that's true. Well, it was great to talk to you, Christos. I really appreciate your time today, and I learned a ton. I hope our audience did as well, and I'll follow up with you offline because I'm sure we could talk about these things all day long, and I'm sure
Definitely.
yeah, good. Well, talk to you
Janine,
soon.
thank you so much. That was fun. I hope it was inspiring and valuable for everybody, and looking forward to the next one. And definitely we'll be in touch offline.
Yes, sounds good.
All right, bye bye.
Yeah.